Hello and welcome to the world's very first IT Major Incident Management Virtual Expo 2019. My name is Adam Norman. I'm the CEO and founder here at MIM, the global best practice training and certification provider for major incident management. So I have the honour of giving the very first presentation at the event, and I'm really excited particularly about the topic. But before I go into that, I'd like to say a very heartfelt thank you from me and the team here at MIM and all of the exhibitors who have chosen to take part for the response from all of you and the professional community. So when me and the team at MIM first decided to create an event to bring major incident managers and major incident professionals all together in one place, we really wanted to transcend some of the usual challenges, particularly with physical events, in that you're suddenly very much dependent on that location and people's ability to travel or budgets or time out of the office. And what we wanted to do was actually transcend those barriers and those borders and allow everyone to take part, and the response has been phenomenal. So we have thousands of professionals from over 70 countries all registered to attend, and you will come from some of the most well-known, well-respected organisations in the world. So thank you for choosing to take part in the event and choosing to be a part of the major incident professional community. So that brings me on to my topic. Something I'm very passionate about and have been since me and the team first conceptualised it back in 2015. MIM 2.0 is what I'd like to talk about, and that is the future of major incident management and the movement that we are seeing within the industry towards MIM 2.0 and a more considered approach to major incident management. So before I need to talk a little bit about the legacy of major incident management. As many of you will know, if you've been in the industry for long enough, there are many leading best practice frameworks, and for whatever reason in the publications that they produced, major incident management was never in those, and even when they were updated, they never really brought major incident management into them in any kind of considered way. Now, please don't get me wrong, these frameworks have been incredibly valuable to businesses and IT and how we create value for the business through IT. And I personally have found this to be extremely useful as a starting point in many of my own professional endeavours. But major incident management took on a life of its own when organisations realised the gap that there was. So they started creating their own major incident teams, their own major incident processes, and embedding that within organisations. So particularly large operations where downtime can mean thousands of pounds of lost trade in a second. But the problems that started to emerge, I think, were indicative of no company championing or centralising major incident management, which is obviously what we do here. So what you found was, if you wanted to get into major incident management within your organisation, the only real information that you had access to was how your organisation did it. And that meant that it was very difficult, even for skilled professionals in major incident management, to reach outside of their organisation and look at new ways of doing things and tap into the collective knowledge. There was almost no community. And what we did get was maybe one talk at a more general programme or seminar, and I believe there are a couple of organisations that did some small workshops, but again, never really talked about major incident management in any kind of really deeply considered way, unlike a lot of the other disciplines within an IT operation. So when we're talking about this concept, if we think about the legacy of major incident management and look at three categories. So if we look at the tools, the people and the process of major incident management in that previous way of working, well, quite simply, the tools didn't exist for a long time. So I can remember, it's a long time ago now, but I can remember being sat issuing initial comms for a major incident, and it was to an email distribution list that was pre-set up. And then after I'd finished doing that, I can remember then having to go to another machine to access a bulk text messaging service and essentially typing out the same message in essentially shorthand, because it was going to pages as well. And those tools weren't even major incident specific. Very little existed to support major incident managers and the process and steps that they need to go through. There was very little in the way of automation. It was very, very manual. And so that's, for tools, that really sums it up. Not much existed for major incident managers, and what we essentially cobbled together and used for our own purposes wasn't necessarily the best or most accurate way, but we didn't have much else. If we consider the people, there's multiple perspectives here. So this, I'm only doing a brief presentation, but I would be happy to talk to any of you offline, because this can actually get very granular when you start looking at perspectives. So let's, for example, take a CIO or head of IT. Really, really interesting when you think about CIOs and heads of IT used to have a real challenge with major incident management. They struggled to quantify the value, and most of that stems from people not understanding or not having the models or access to models to understand the cost of downtime, both the intangibles and the tangibles. So it can be as simple as an e-commerce site goes offline, well, we forecast revenue, or we know what we would usually take in that period, this is costing us X. But it can get more complex. When you actually look at major organisations and the number of large projects they have going on, a single day of downtime for individuals who are working on that project, well, there is a cost to each of those workers. And so there is actually additional damage in terms of lost time and the additional cost of labour. And so there's loads of aspects you can look at to quantify major incident downtime and the damage it's doing. Another one is reputational damage, the brand damage. Does the share price get hit? And that can be in quite extreme circumstances, but these are all things to consider. If you're in a leadership position, the legacy of major incident management is that you had very little in the way of transparency or information to base decisions, particularly budget spend on. So a CIO really didn't have the information to understand the return on investment they would get from putting financial resources and energy and time into major incident management. That's the legacy there, and that's one perspective. If you then look at, say, head of major incident management or VP of major incident management or head of service, someone who is accountable for a major incident service, the legacy was that they didn't really have models for developing and supporting their people. They also didn't have much structure in the way of job families, so understanding where that role sat within the organisation. And I'll talk about this a bit in a moment. It's really interesting. You look at the banks, who are normally quite good at quantifying their downtime. They take major incident management really seriously, and they understand that they have to create the same structure and incentives that you would for any other role for major incident management. So they pay very good salaries, which means they get very experienced and skilled major incident managers. They give a senior title within the organisation and position it as such. And they also tier it, so there are lower levels of major incident management and things for people to work to and aspire to and understand the skill sets and competencies that they have to evolve to achieve those higher levels. But the legacy is that most organisations didn't have that. So even when they got very talented individuals, if those were ambitious individuals, they would potentially move on to other roles, and you almost have a single point of failure. You lose that skill, you have onboarding time for even a new experienced major incident manager. And so the legacy is that someone heading that service didn't really take a holistic view or have any models to consider their talent acquisition program or their talent nurturing program from within the organisation, and they didn't build any processes around that, and they didn't necessarily have the time to think about that. And this isn't all organisations, but this is typically the legacy. I'm very fortunate and privileged. I get to, well, me and the team get to work and consult with some of the largest and most successful organisations in the world. So we really get an understanding of the trends that we see and the issues. And these are really common, even by today's standards. The issues around understanding where major incident management sits and structuring your incentives and organisation so that major incident managers thrive and they choose to stay with your organisation instead of moving on, losing all of that talent and skill. We can then look at it from an operational perspective, and I'll limit it to those three, but there are many, many perspectives, and you can talk about for the people category. But operational major incident managers, the legacy is that, again, there wasn't a lot of understanding or consideration around how much impact good leadership skills, collaboration make for a major incident manager and the major incident process. Particularly when you're looking at major incident management as the operational process as a three-part process. So initial 15 minutes, and you're looking to engage the relevant resolve groups, initial comms. In the middle, where you are looking for workarounds and you are looking to create action plans with a massive team of resolving groups who potentially are not in the same location or with different skill sets, different temperaments. The legacy is that people did not understand the value of a major incident manager having these mental models, understanding leadership, having a really deep understanding of communication skills and how to tailor their communication for those individuals that maximises collaboration and the major incident relationship ecosystem for people. And there wasn't an understanding of actually the downtime reduces, particularly in the middle, when somebody is an efficient leader and understands those models. So that's the legacy. Don't get me wrong, there's still very good major incident managers, very talented people. And a lot of that is natural skill and talent. But what we see is a huge trend of downtime reducing in the middle when people do understand and do take the time to develop those leadership skills, the communication skills and collaboration, and put concerted effort into it. So that's from an operational perspective for major incident managers. The legacy is that there was very little focus on that, and also little understanding of the return that you actually see for that. And finally, let's talk about the legacy of process. The legacy of process for major incident management is that major incident management has a major incident process, and that typically was seen as the operational process. So i.e. the steps taken within that process to achieve a desirable outcome and the roles and responsibilities within that, and also the policies. But that really means there wasn't a particularly holistic view at the entire major incident service and all of the value that is created by the individual and collective components. So I'll talk about MIM 2.0 and the movement towards this and what MIM is now starting to look like in the industry and where we are headed. And I'll start with the process. So what's really interesting about the process is in MIM 2.0, we understand that yes, there is the operational major incident process, we have a best practice for that, and we all continually contribute every year to evolve that and make that as robust and as sustainable as possible. But there are other processes within the ecosystem. If you run a major incident service, what is your process around talent acquisition? Do you have repeatable steps and roles and responsibilities within that process to ensure a repeatable and desirable outcome? What about your talent retention? Do you have a process around that? And that can actually be around defining your major incident culture, having really strong core values for the major incident service and a code of conduct that individuals understand what is expected of them. And that can actually really help guide all the decisions they make. Also, what is your process for creating transparency? So that can be as simple as quantifying downtime and sharing that with the senior leadership team. Is there a process whereby you do that? And these are just activities, but these are wider activities in the major incident ecosystem, and I would suggest that MIM 2.0 actually starts to deeply consider all of these as processes as well as just the operational major incident process. So next I'm going to talk about the tools. The tools in MIM 2.0 are really quite spectacular. We're very fortunate to have many exhibitors here who are leading software providers and have solutions for major incident management. And the interesting thing is, again, when we do consulting and meet with clients, most of the industry has never heard of these solutions, and the impact they can have on an operation is remarkable. So for example, the major incident tools that are available can automate a lot of your communication and engagement around resolver groups. They do far more than this, but it's really, really interesting. I would urge you to take the time to have a look. There's another aspect. In MIM 2.0, we stop treating suppliers like suppliers, and we start looking at them as long-term partners. And what I mean by that is, instead of going and looking at the various tools and going, fantastic, this is going to have a huge impact and reduce downtime for my operation, purchasing those licenses, implementing it in the organisation, then going, fantastic, we get this value and we exchange money for that value. MIM 2.0 is more considered. What we do is we look at these suppliers as partners for the long term. What I mean by that is there is a concerted effort by us to continually engage with these suppliers and with these partners so that we can give critical feedback, not just on how to refine the solution in the here and now, but actually talking to them about your future desires and vision for your major incident service. How can they fit in? And what they will do is take the information you give them and just continually refine, which will create more value for you. And again, the whole ecosystem of the major incident industry benefits from this. But it is a concerted effort, and it does take time and effort, but treating them very much like partners instead of suppliers, and taking the time and effort to work with them. So finally, let's talk about the people in MIM 2.0. Again, multiple perspectives, and I will only talk about a few because otherwise this talk would be extremely long. But let's talk about CIOs that we talked about. So CIOs or head of function or IT directors. If you're in that role, MIM 2.0 calls for you to take a more vigilant stance on major incident management. It calls for you to engage more with the leaders of that major incident service and work with them and work with the business to create more transparency. And with that transparency, you will find that actually leaders will start to invest more budget and create better, more sustainable and robust major incident teams. And that brings us to the next perspective. If you head a major incident service with a manager of a major incident service, MIM 2.0 calls for you to continually be evolving your people, your process and your tools. So taking that responsibility and really starting to consider how your people are engaging with the rest of the business, how are you supporting them within the business? And so everything is a concerted effort. How are you helping them to build relationships? What processes and activities are you putting in place? And MIM 2.0 takes a really collaborative approach for the entire IT operation, and again looks at the long term of how do we all win collectively, not just get the result for this individual major incident. So finally, I'll talk about the operational perspective, and this actually ties into the perspective of the manager of the service as well. But MIM 2.0 is far smarter about the skills and knowledge that we all develop. We track it and we always measure because we want to understand the benefits that we are getting. We need to be able to quantify that. But we understand in MIM 2.0 that leadership is a real asset for us, and taking the time out of the business to develop our leadership skills, and that doesn't have to be necessarily formal training with us. That can be reading, that can be taking time to learn more about the history of leadership and leadership theory, can be taking time to look at new models outside of your own industry, look about how do we apply them. MIM 2.0 calls upon all of us to take about accountability, but also to ask the what if questions and not just accept this is the way things have always been done. We are all collectively looking to continually evolve our service. With the leadership skills, MIM 2.0 takes a look at other industries, and it takes a look at the communication skills and how we tailor individual communication to individual styles. And that makes a real difference to reducing downtime. Thank you very much for listening to the talk. I've really enjoyed doing it. This is infinitely deep, so if anyone would like to continue the discussion, please do feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn, to me or one of the team, or drop us an email. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to meeting all of you.